Good afternoon. I'm John Orlock. I'm the interim director of the Baker Norwood Center for the Humanities, and it's a Thursday afternoon and a crowded afternoon, and you are part of a new embarkation. This afternoon we are streaming live. This is Thursday afternoon live. Here we are. You know, coming out to here, streaming live to Hudson and to the Laurel Lake retirement community up there. So this is the first of the Senior Connections program broadcast from Baker Norwood, at least, in conjunction with the University Circle institutions. And we'll have several more of these this semester as we move out and take the humanities out of Clark Hall and into the world.
Are we audio and video?
Yes, we are audio and video, and we'll have questions coming in from Hudson. Runners, I think, are on their way now, coming in. Before we get to that, this is our Baker Norwood brochure, which we will have at the back of the room for your information on the way out. Two events coming up in the near future. One, on the 20th, is a documentary called Bill Cunningham, New York. And I don't know how many of you may have seen this when this screened at the Cleveland Cinematheque this summer. I saw it and I said, we have to bring it in here. It's an extraordinary documentary about Bill Cunningham, who is 80 years old. He's a photographer, has been for 30 years, a fashion photographer for the New York Times, and travels around New York on a bicycle, attends all of the highest of high society events, and it's an insight into the fashion world, but also into the soul of a man who's an artist and was dedicated to fashion as an art form. An extraordinary piece of work. This is Monday, the 20th of February. Wallstein Center? Yeah. Wallstein Center, over on the other side of campus. In 2 weeks, then, let me check the date. February 23rd, Ken Ledford, also of the History Department, will be presenting his works in progress on the German judicial system right here in 206 Clark. Also, on your way out, I usually have them up here, I don't today. Could you hold up one of those yellow pieces of paper? Here we are, thank you. This is the yellow piece of paper that you may be sitting on or may have removed it from your seat. This is the feedback sheet that is important to us. It tells us who you are, tells us why you're here, and gives us an indication of where we may go next with our programming. So please, on your way out, fill this out, and there'll be a basket at the back.
Is it confidential?
Pardon?
Is it confidential?
We send this out to more places. I mean, we are looking, I mean, Facebook does it, so we are looking to, you know, capitalize on this. We must get $1.280 back on these things. So, no, it's all confidential.
Well, you held it up for everyone to read, that's right.
Well, yes, I understand. That's what the internet is for. Today, John Grabowski is the Krieger-Mueller Associate Professor in Applied History in the Department of History, where he holds that chair. And he's also the senior vice president, he reminded me today, senior vice president of research at the Western Reserve Historical Society. And his interests span beyond Cleveland, into Cleveland, about writing about viaducts, writing about Cleveland sports, which I didn't know about.
Sports fan that I am.
And he specializes in the area of immigration and ethnicity, local Cleveland's urban history. And In addition to his teaching in the department, he oversees the World Wide Web edition of the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History, Dictionary of Cleveland Biography. His current work involves with immigration and institutions in Turkey. That he's exploring these areas, and he hopes to be able to build a collaboration between CWRU and universities in Turkey. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you, John.
John Grabowski.
Thanks very much.
I'm delighted and honored to see this large turnout for a discussion of the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History. And some of what I'll be doing tonight is this afternoon, it may be tonight by the time I'm done, is reminiscence. But more so, this is a talk about the evolution of one of the most outstanding digital humanities products here at Case Western Reserve University, its history and evolution, and the way that it has had to change and modify itself to prosper and survive in the changing world of digital humanities over time. And it'll be about some challenges and some prospects for the encyclopedia. The reminiscence is inevitable. This is a work in progress presentation. This work's been in progress for me since 1981. The personal story is that when David Van Tassel, who was my mentor, and I and the staff sent off the first copy to the printers at Indiana University Press, the encyclopedia, late 1986. I went home and I told my wife, thank God that's over. I'm never doing this again. And so here I am, and despite that minor pseudo complaint, it has been a lifetime of enjoyment, sometimes frustration, but it's also allowed me a catbird seat to watch the evolution, the way public history has changed, the way public access to the past has changed, and how scholars in a university such as Case Western Reserve University can best communicate about the past and about other issues to a broader public. And that's what this is about. The subtitle I'll leave as a mystery for you, From Wang to Wiki. How many of you remember Wang word processors? Okay, there we go. This is basically it. Let's go through some PowerPoint here. There is a digital, quote-unquote, humanities project on the web now that attracts, it's the 6th most, I use humanities very loosely here, I'm trying to be edgy. It is the 6th most used website in the world. It's the Wikipedia. And how many of you remember the Stop Online Piracy Act protest? And the wiki went blank. The wiki went blank. Oh, God. And there were actually articles that said librarians are going to have to work overtime because the wiki is shut down. I don't know if any of you caught that. And Google went pseudo blank. But the power of this product, and we're going to talk about what it is immense. And that is one of the challenges you have for a scholarly humanities project, such as the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History, is to fit in the competition with this, to provide substantive information, and I'm not going to say it's totally unsubstantive, I have 2 more slides here, in a way that the public has come to expect. And that's what I do at the Western Reserve Historical Society with Gaynor Davis. We're continually in public history between academic history, what is being found, what is solid, what is important, and what the public expects, wants, and desires. And that's been the most interesting thing about the duality of my career is moving from one place to another and trying to sometimes bridge gaps. But this is it. This is the Wikipedia. Multiple languages, 3 million plus entries in English. The Germans are right up there. They have 1.3 million entries. And as you know, the Wikipedia is user-created, user-edited, user-generated. And the Wikipedia has many things going right with it, many things going wrong with it. Here's a quote. I will read it to you. The user who visits the Wikipedia to learn about some subject, to confirm some matter of fact, is rather in the position of a visitor to a public restroom. It may be obviously dirty, so that he knows to exercise great care, or it may seem to be fairly clean, so that he may be lulled into a false sense of security. What he certainly does not know is who has used the facilities before him. Now, this is an act of self-deprecation on the part of the Wikipedia, because that is from their article about themselves. So that is one view, and we in the faculty here give firm warning to our students. Wikipedia is dangerous territory. But then we in the faculty sometimes Google the Wikipedia and look up a date. Here's another view from the late Roy Rosenzweig, who was the founder of the Center for History and New Media at George Mason University, really the font of much of what is happening in digital humanities. Should those who write history for a living join such popular history makers in writing history in Wikipedia? My own tentative answer is yes. If Wikipedia is becoming the family encyclopedia for the 21st century, historians probably have a professional obligation to make it as good as possible. So there is something, there's a tension going on that needs to be resolved. Rosenzweig died, I believe, in 2008. This is from an article, extraordinary article in the Journal of American History. So there's this other aspect to the Wikipedia, but both the Wikipedia and the encyclopedia are descendants of an Enlightenment development in the spread of knowledge. First encyclopedia is that of Diderot, Denis Diderot. 1751. There's the cover. Now, what I love here is this is a copy of the frontispiece for Diderot, and there's a website now where you can read Diderot's encyclopedia. So we're already bridging the virtual and the real, and it's been translated to English. Thank goodness for me, my French is non-existent, and it is fully searchable. So Diderot would be amazed at what this accumulation of the best knowledge of his time, how it has survived and become widely available. Now, not to be outdone by the French, the Brits in 1768 created the Encyclopedia Britannica. There are a whole raft of encyclopedias that follow on that. I mean, World Book was the standard for many people in the 1950s and 60s, but here's one of the editions of Britannica, not the first, and here's the online Britannica. Now, Britannica is in the same position as is Encarta, which is an online encyclopedia, as the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History. The competition is fierce. And the competition for online information is not simply confined to Wikipedia. One merely needs to put a term in Google and go to a variety of sources. And then buyer beware. So it's a very, very different world. It's a world that did not fully exist when we began to create the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History. Now, if you're careful, this is a Bill Clintonian phrase. There are some modifiers in here. The Encyclopedia of Cleveland History was the first modern American urban encyclopedia. Modern and American. There was a modern Encyclopedia of London, England that came out a year before us, and there are previous attempts to do urban history in encyclopedic format. This is the man who did it all. And David Van Tassel, this is an interesting story, and here we go into a little reminiscence. David Van Tassel was a student of Merle Curti at the University of Wisconsin, Curti being one of the giants of American intellectual history. Merle Curti had been a student of Frederick Jackson Turner, the very font of American history. So David Van Tassel's bona fides, his credentials, go back to really the beginning of professional history. Turner, that's a very strong beginning. But David didn't abandon the intellectual ship. He came to Case Western Reserve in 1969, and he sensed at that point that history was in trouble, that there were issues of declining enrollments, that people who were graduating with doctorates could not find positions teaching. And he began to go beyond the normal confines of academic history. He created programs here, was one of the primary creators of programs in archival museum studies at Case Western Reserve University. He then went on in 1974 to create National History Day. I think almost all of you are aware of that. He created National History Day not just so young students could have fun, but he was concerned that students weren't being taught where history came from. And the emphasis on National History Day was using, as it is now, original sources to do good history. in a variety of formats, which now include web creation. So David's vision was broad. And in 1980, he was known as a great grants person. I can tell some stories out of school here, but I once ran into a colleague who had actually written for the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History. He was at a university south of Cleveland, but still in the state of Ohio. I have to be very circumspect. He said, well, that Van Tassel, that blankety-blank guy sucks all the money out of NEH. We don't get any other stuff here in Ohio. He had good ideas, and they were ideas of the time. In 1980, he was called by Homer Wadsworth, then the head of the Cleveland Foundation, and he said, David, we'd like you to write a new history of Cleveland. And he thought, and told the story to me quickly about it, he said, I'm not the person to do that. He said, history is a very broad field now. Urban history has spread out to include women's history, labor history. It was a new social history. He said, I'll think about it. And he went back to the Cleveland Foundation. He said, the way we should do this, Homer, is in encyclopedic format. And the Cleveland Foundation provided seed funding. And I'll give you the figures. It took 7 years to create the first encyclopedia. Subsequent edition came out in 1996, printed edition. Altogether, they raised about $1.3 million to support those projects. And the work was done by people like Martha Gibbons, who is still here at the university. The late Jim Conway and Ralph Bessie was our particular god for entree to Cleveland's business community. David, we worked on the encyclopedia as we raised the funds. We ate as we went along, so to speak, and it eventually came out. He was a magnificent fundraiser. This is a very rare volume. This is the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History edition that you've never seen. Is anybody here from KSL? We're going to put this in your rare book room. You know, how do you sell a book? You know, people say, well, what is it going to look like? So he went to a local bindery and he had a dummy made up. And this was carried in and out of corporate offices to the Union Club and other places. Well, this is what it's going to look like. But that aside, the book came out. And I'll talk a little bit more about it. The first edition was 1987. The second revised edition was done along with an accompanying Dictionary of Cleveland Biography for the city's bicentennial in 1996. I will argue that these two volumes and Diderot and Britannica and any other encyclopedia are, in one sense, wikis, because they ask for a variety of contributors who have expertise in an area to provide their knowledge to a joint corporative scholarly effort. The difference between those and the wiki is that those people are selected and their work is edited and vetted carefully. David bridged that a little bit further because when he started the encyclopedia, the question was what was going to be in it and who was going to determine the content. And he did this by creating a series of 24 task forces created around subject areas, everything from architecture to women's history, of scholars in the community, of students, and of buffs and popular historians. And they gathered and they suggested the topics they felt belonged in an encyclopedia about Cleveland, Cuyahoga County being the boundaries that we set. And those topics came in, and strangely, this is a talk that I gave years ago, there were only 600 or 700 topics suggested. And we didn't think that was sufficient. So David and I then sat down and went through the histories and pulled out other topics, so we fleshed it out. But who would we get to write these? We went back to those community members and scholars and said, would you like to write on this, that, or the other thing? Send it in. And they did. So we had the content of the encyclopedia, which I'll discuss in some detail later, is a combination of somebody who knows the Civil War so well that he knew where the bullet went in and the bullet exited on somebody, but had expertise far beyond anybody in the academic community. And we have academic articles as well. They were edited, they were set to a standard, they were checked for veracity several times. As closely as we could, we looked for factual accuracy, but it was a community effort. It was a wiki, but of a different sort. And we'll have to keep reminding ourselves about that encyclopedias are corporatized scholarship. And then, you know, this was the first urban encyclopedia. And then we went online. The World Wide Web was relatively new. And that's what, again, much praise to David. Neither he or I were experts at that point in the World Wide Web or anything technological. The funny story here was that when we started the project, the first place we gathered the information list was somebody had access to a Wang word processor buried in the bowels of a building somewhere out in an edge city in Cleveland. It was like walking into the Starship Enterprise to do this, put the list together. And then we began writing articles, and David said, you know, I said, well, we're going to type these, aren't we? And he said, no, we're getting word processors. I said, no, I don't want to do word processing. So we brought in digital deck-made word processors. So if you look at this project, it spans everything from the Wang up to the wiki. But in '98, David, the second edition had come out. It had been out for 2 years. And the web was there, and David said, let's put this on the web. And he went to Ray Neff, Information Technology Services at CWRU, and he schmoozed him into designing the website. And that was basically $100,000 in-kind work. And so we were the first urban encyclopedia on the World Wide Web. And so therefore, we're proud. This is our new design. And I'm going to talk about our grad students later on, but this was a design created by one of my grad students who's sitting right there, John Baden, who, there we go. And that's what holds this together. And it became painfully obvious by 2010 that our first website was terribly out of date and creaky. And so we had to change the technology. So there we are. So what happens? We also have another site here at CWRU. The main server is at ITS, but Kelvin Smith Library has archived every edition of the encyclopedia, that is virtual edition. Every year they harvest the entire content and they save it in the digital archive at Kelvin Smith Library. So therefore we have a secure backup, and therefore people who want to trace the evolution of a particular article can follow it through that website. This is a critical scholarly backup. So the university has been extraordinarily good in this. The other partner in the encyclopedia, in the second edition, we'll go back to this, is the Western Reserve Historical Society. And so that volume and this website tie together the research potential held here in the faculty and collections at Case Western Reserve University and in the enormous collections at the Western Reserve Historical Society. And when we talk about the future of the encyclopedia toward the end of this talk, we talk about how those collections are going to figure into it. Frankly, the first edition, even though we were an official partner at the historical sites, we on both sides, almost all the research had to be done there because the collections were so enormous. And we were building our new library at that time, and the old library was closed for a while, and that was a catastrophe for our research teams. So that's a digital archived edition at Digital Case. Set a precedent, bragging rights. We published hard copy in '87 and '96, Indianapolis, followed in '94. I just got great joy. We beat New York. And Kenneth Jackson, one of the doyens of urban history, Los Angeles and Louisville. Now, there are state encyclopedias, there are regional encyclopedias. This whole encyclopedia phenomena grew in the 80s and 90s. And at one point, the National Endowment for the Humanities, which initially had been somewhat chary to embrace these, was embracing them wholeheartedly. So let's look at a few. There's the Encyclopedia of Chicago. That's the other urban one that's online. And although you can't read it, I will point out two things. Editor is Janice L. Reif, who was on our faculty here in the history department at CWRU. And Jim Grossman was the immediate past president of the American Historical Association. So it was good to see Jim Grossman there because he is also very interested in the impact of public history. As Carl Becker once said, every man is his own historian. Every person, if I paraphrase that, is his or her own historian. So you have that, and now you have state encyclopedias. The Nevada one is a hoot. But it has things that we'd like to emulate: streaming video, scannable panoramic photographs. And there are other ways of accessing our urban history now, and a lot of it is happening at Cleveland State University. Bill Barrow and Mark Thibault, in particular, have done wondrous things with Cleveland's history. This is the Cleveland Memory Project, which is Bill Barrow's project, It draws heavily on their collections, particularly the Cleveland Press collections, but you'll notice that we partner with them. They link to us at the encyclopedia, we link back to them. So there is this incredible growth of data. And if you have an iPhone and you don't have the Historical Cleveland app, which has been developed at CSU and their Center for Digital Humanities, you ought to get that. And one of the things we would like to do, and we'll be discussing this with CSU, is on each of these apps to have a direct link to relevant articles in the encyclopedia so it feeds back and forth. Our policy in the encyclopedia, and I stand as editor now, is to make the information as freely available as possible, to share it where we can, to go back and forth, because that's the nature of things. But we're different than a wiki. And I'm going to do a side-by-side, and this is only partial. This is John D. Rockefeller on the wiki. This is John D. Rockefeller in the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History. Obviously a shorter, more compact article, edited down to the very nub of what we needed, because there's so much else available at Rockefeller elsewhere. John D. Rockefeller on the web, on the wiki, it expands, contracts, it expands, it contracts, gets re-edited. And one of the things that Roy Rosenzweig in his article on the Wikipedia, which I quoted earlier, found about the wiki is that generally in non-contentious articles, you don't want to read the article about the Armenian genocide. And that's been taken off of editing because at one point, A would edit it, B would change it. And this was, you've seen that. So those are locked down now. But Rosenzweig looked very carefully in his 2006 article at the wiki and found out that generally it was quite accurate. Self-correcting, got correct dates. But very often he found that its approach to a topic was non-scholarly. It was popular, it was semi-humorous. The narrative, because of the editing, wasn't a linear narrative. There were issues with the wiki. But what Rosenzweig does in that article is quite interesting. I liked him because he was always trying to pull the tail, if you will, of the historical profession and say, there's a change coming on, you should get ready for it. Saying that this type of corporatized research, which is very prevalent in the sciences, may be coming to the humanities. And we in the humanities are usually single scholars, working on our topics, but it's a different product. And the most important thing about this product is that we have faith that it's solid and accurate. We stand by it. The encyclopedia today, what are its assets, what are its challenges, what's its potential? Where is it going to go? Its assets are rather considerable. The Krieger-Mueller Chair at the university, which is shared, the Krieger-Mueller historian right now serves as historian for the Western Reserve Historical Society and a senior vice president. It is endowed, the endowment being held by both institutions. That guarantees, and part of the job description is editorship of the online encyclopedia. So both institutions share that. And endowments are critical. That means there will always be an editor. Once I win the lottery, there will be another editor. There are also Bessie and Friedman endowments which support graduate students at the usual customary stipend in the department. And we now are able to support 1.3 graduate students per academic year. And those students have initially, when we began using students on the online edition, we're going to talk about that, we assigned them saying, you will edit this, you will update this, you will correct this. We still ask them to do this, but one of the treasures we found is that our students come in with training and skill sets in areas that are not yet fully represented in the encyclopedia. So one of our grad students, who is sitting here, has expertise in baseball history. And prior to her appearance as a Bessie Fellow, our entries on the Negro Leagues were okay, but they weren't complete. We are now complete. We have a full set of entries on every Negro League team that played in Cleveland. Another one of the grad students, they're all sitting front row here, no, they're not front row, had expertise in African American history. He was working with Professor Rhonda Williams. And we immediately set him on to updating, correcting, and expanding entries relating to African American history. One of our current people is interested in labor history. So we've begun to take the expertise of students, whether it's environmental history, labor's history, or women's history, and allow them to practice that and to create material that is accessible to a general public. So they're being scholars who bridge the sometimes awesome gap between the scholarly monograph and public taste. Partnership with WRHS, we'll talk more about this, as I said, and within CWRU, we couldn't exist if ITS didn't support the server and if KSL didn't archive the content. So this is pro bono in a way. Collaborations are increasing. As I mentioned, we collaborate with Cleveland Memory. It's great. We're not out trying to trump one product over another. We're trying to connect and give citizens of Cleveland the best history possible, and scholars outside of Cleveland. And then the organizations chronicled in the encyclopedia, what we've been doing is we've been going to their websites, finding the historical sketch and putting that URL as a connector in our article, and then asking them to reciprocate by leading people to us. So there's a lot of reciprocity that goes on in this. Challenges? Oh boy. Keeping the past up to date. It's really interesting. I think when somebody picks up an old printed encyclopedia from the shelf, they don't expect it to be up to date. They understand the situation, although Britannica really had some problems at times because they weren't updating rapidly enough, and some of their content was fairly archaic and fairly problematic. But nevertheless, with a printed volume, that's not the case with an online encyclopedia. And we hear about it. We didn't have LeBron going away for a while. Okay? Maybe that was wishful thinking. I don't know. But seriously, we have a feedback column and people talk to us. And I hate to say it, the articles that we really update rapidly are the sports articles. You know, did the Indians win or lose? But we have problems in how to deal with the content. Huron Road Hospital closes. What do you do that? When does a company close? Nearly 2/3 of the articles in the online encyclopedia, and there are 4,400 of them, have some what I would call linear continuity. The entities are still going. Individuals must be deceased to be chronicled in the encyclopedia with a biographical sketch. But this means that we have to continually update, and we once looked at our staff and their ability and their production, and we felt that if the staff did nothing but update content, in the hours per week they had allocated to the encyclopedia, it would take us 5 years to update all the updatable content. And then, like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, we'd start all over again and go all the way through it. That's something we have to deal with. It's a difficult issue. This is difficult. The encyclopedia that is printed looks like it does because of certain reasons. We only had a certain number of pages. Ergo, we could only have a certain number of articles. Ergo, we could then only have articles of certain lengths. We actually divided the articles in 3 categories. We called interpretive essays, which were done by scholars that looked at major topics such as transportation or race relations, and they did it in a critical interpretive fashion. Then supporting them were somewhat shorter articles, secondary, let's say under transportation, you would have railroads that did pretty much the same, but the bulk of the encyclopedia was to be 250 to 500 word articles, sort of nuts and bolts about people, places, things, and events that linked to those top articles. Now that we're in the candy store of infinite space, the question is, do we expand the content? Do I allow my student editors, associate editors, to write all they want to about an article, or do I exercise some control over it? And we're going to opt for exercising some control. I think we need to try to keep the same data in the short entries as before. But it is that's a real challenge. And it is a far different world. It's infinitely expandable. Expectations for non-textual content. First encyclopedia printed, no pictures. Second one had illustrations, limited number. We put the illustrations up on the web. They were wonderful. People thought it was path-breaking when we got there. We're behind the curve now. Streaming video, streaming audio, still images. That's what people see in an encyclopedia, and that's what they appreciate. We're going to cure that, and I'll tell you how. Continue to build awareness in the community. One of the things we have to continue to do is, and this turnout today says maybe I don't have to do my work that hard. Our work that hard is to get the story out that was really a popular story in the 80s and 90s about this product. We need, on behalf of it's a huge, important product for both institutions. It's a credit to both institutions, and it needs more promotion, and we're working with that. We also have something that I'm totally oblivious to. I mean, I'm not tech savvy. A Wang is a Wang, a deckmate's a deckmate. But software and platform changes, the world after Wang. And one of the things we're working on right now is we have an editor that allows us to update, or put up new material and so forth. It doesn't work as well as it should given the new system. And so we've just gotten a grant from Baker Nord to hire somebody to rewrite that editor. So periodically we have to change the system, and we need technical expertise in that. And I'm hoping we can rely on students for that as well. It's a training situation. Making vetted scholarly content attractive to a wide public audience. I'm looking at my boss, Gaynor. That's our challenge at the Historical Society, making scholarly content attractive, popular, meaningful. And we have to be competitive with products like the Wiki. And I go back to what Rosenzweig said. If you can't sit back if you're a scholar and complain about a product like the Wiki unless you get in there and work within it or provide another product that the public wants. I'm very much a public historian, very much an academic historian. The future, the potentials, enormous resources of non-textual materials at the Western Reserve Historical Society. Estimated 4 million images, sound files, film. We have a cooperative program with Kelvin Smith Library right now, Memorandum of Understanding, where things from our collections are being digitized. I hold here a digital version of 16mm film of the National Air Races in Cleveland. So between the two institutions, we'll be able to do that and get that material up once the new editor is there. We have basically, I think, Mr. Baden has skimmed about 4,000 photographs out of our collections. He has them ready to upload once we get the editor in. So it's going to be a good place not only for people to visualize history in Cleveland, but for the Historical Society to market and make apparent a product that it has. We're also talking, this is, we bounded the bound volumes by Cuyahoga County. We're a region. And one of the challenges in the future is maybe the content should reflect the region. That's a huge job of generating new content. We can do fuller utilization of student and faculty expertise at CWRU. We also will be engaging with academic and student expertise in regional history at area colleges and universities, and we're going to be going back to the community. That's part of the plan. It is the 25th anniversary of the publication of the first volume, and that's why I'm here talking about where it can go, where we will be taking it. And much of my job is going to be focused on doing some of this. But we need to go back to the beginning to get ideas for what is not in there. And we do have a talk back. People can feedback, say, well, you've got Joe Fabitson, what about his brother Sam? You forgot so-and-so. You have my mother's middle initial wrong. We can do that, but there's so much that has happened in history subsequent to the last major writing, which is the early 90s, that needs to be included. So that's what we're going to do, provided we get there. We are thinking, and we're probably going to do this once the editor is in place. This is one of these moments of revelation. It was not falling off my mule on the road to Damascus, but it came to me that part of the job I have at the Historical Society is editing the finding aids for archival collections. And they're all prefaced by a history of the organization or a biography of the individual. And it occurred to me that if one wanted to save time, and this has been edited and vetted, that maybe for the moment we could load them as placeholders for that organization or that individual. It would help us move ahead, and it would also drive traffic to the Historical Society. This is for the Soziana. You can do this, Charles. Your Italian's better than mine. Okay. So it's an Italian fraternal society in Cleveland. And we are also going to, even with existing entries, our staff at the Historical Society has been taking these registers, as we call them, the inventories to collections, and putting them up on OhioLink as marked up EAD finding aids. And we will be embedding links, let's say at the end of the Carl Stokes entry, that will take you directly to the Carl Stokes finding aid when it is up on Ohio Link. So that's where we'll be building. These are rather easy things to do. This is Workwear Corporation. Uploading images. Once we get the editor done, this is like, you know, do I allow articles to get longer? How many images will we want to put up? There are 2 images from our collection, just samples. This is Hiram House Social Settlement, 1905. It's the playground. It's a set of climbing bars that every lawyer in town would be standing under right now. No disrespect to lawyers. This is an incredible shot of Lakeview Terrace, a model public housing project, late 1930s, Whiskey Island and the Ore Docks. It's taken from a collection of 17,000 aerial photographs of Cleveland, which date from the 1920s to the 1970s at the Historical Society. The potentials are vast. I love both photographs. This is my chance to show off my favorite things. 21st century wish, 5th anniversary wish list. If and I'm not allowed to fundraise, but I can talk about fundraising. Is that okay? The most critical thing is to increase the endowments that support our graduate students. This does 3 things. It will enable other people to study within the incredible Department of History here at Case Western Reserve University. It will allow those people to get their feet wet in public or applied history. And it will allow us the person power that we need to do so many of the jobs on the encyclopedia. It's a long-term investment. If you want to know, the ticket is probably $250,000 per student to create the endowed funds that we need to support them. But I'm not 7th floor Crawford, so that's where I would put the money, because then that endowment can also use, we would love to put up snippets of music from the Cleveland Orchestra or 9 Inch Nails. We can't because of copyright. So if we could pay the appropriate fee for things that are held, we could link and make them accessible. I mean, why have an article on the Cleveland Orchestra and not be able to listen to it? As well as 9 Inch Nails. So that's what we would do. And then to buy technical time as we need it. People at ITS and Kelvin Smith Library doing a lot of work pro bono and being able to pay back for that would make it much easier for them to do that work. So that's what, I'm sorry, it comes down to money. That's what made this whole thing possible. And why do it? Why? I go back to Roy Rosenzweig. Why invest in a product like this? Why have we kept pushing this for 25 plus years? Rosenzweig, historians probably have a professional obligation to make it as good as possible. I think we do. Both for our academic peers and for the public who are deeply interested in the past. It will allow us to utilize this. We have a lot of intellectual and fiscal capital embedded in the material on that website. It's $1.5 million if you want to bring it up. We need to continue that. We need to connect the sponsoring institutions to the community and region. One of the things both institutions, Case Western Reserve University, Western Reserve Historical Society, strive to do is to be a part of the community in which they exist. And a product like this shows their interest in their care for that community. And training students in both public history and digital humanities. It's an important tool for them. I would say again that the students who I've had work with me in the last 4 to 5 years, their expertise in what we used to call technology broadly. I've been reminded by my colleague Ed Persh that technology is a lot of things, but their expertise in the new electronic technology is beyond anything that I'm going to acquire. And they have been critical, and they're able to use that to take their scholarship and make it available. So that's what we're going to do. And I'll close with this. That's the biography of David D. Van Tassel on the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History. And because he was a remarkable individual and a historian with foresight, we have a product today that has been first in many ways, continues to be first in many ways, but which I think is really a credit to vision and persistence. The story I'll close with is he took us all out to dinner, all the staff, just after we sent the floppy disks off to Indiana University Press. And by the time the disc got to Indiana University Press, everybody had gone to PCs. And so they had to find somebody to convert the Wang information into whatever the word processing system was they were using then. Nevertheless, we sent them off, and he took us to Isabella's, and we sat down there and celebrated. And I was honest with him. I said, David, I said, I never thought we would do this. I said, I thought this was going to fail. This was an impossible project. And he said, when you have a good idea and you know it's a good idea, it will occur. And that stuck with me. And that's, I think one of the reasons I'm still passionate about that is because A, my connection with David, but B, because we honestly believe this is a product that serves the community and the institutions that sponsor it. I guess we have time for questions. Thank you. Yes.
John, this is exciting stuff, and I think you should be commended for the work you've done here. Let me just ask, now that you've gone digital in a big way, have we seen the last of the hard copy editions of the encyclopedia?
I think so. I honestly think so. It would be, one of the problems we would have is that the content now is beyond the boundaries of the single or dual volume. And the illustrations wouldn't be carried with it. I mean, it could be done truncated, but I have to be very honest with you, given the way young people learn. I just came back from teaching a seminar in the room next here. This is not, it's not the way we're going to reach them. As a matter of fact, one of the things, we still publish books at the Western Reserve Historical Society, but we're going to be doing e-books simultaneously with printed volumes. That we need to touch both. Looking at Anne-Marie, you need to touch both areas of the universe. Yes. Sorry, I could have gone that way.
You talked a bit about non-textual information and uploading that, and that's a lot of megabytes. Are you thinking in terms of linking to other sources such as YouTube or iTunes, or is that where your thinking is going?
We do some of that already, but in partially because of the link to the websites of institutions that are profiled. But I'm thinking more of having them within the encyclopedia, because that gives it a proprietary attitude toward them. I'm trying to find the right word here. And we will probably do them in lower-res files, at least for still images, simply because we want to prevent them from wandering further. But we won't. I know that once you put it up on the web, it's going to go someplace else. There's no, but it's good for the institution, I think, to do that. And I think particularly if we're working with the resources at Kelvin Smith Library and WRHS, to really point the public to say there are two enormous bodies of material here, and they say a lot about our region. But yeah, that's what we'll probably be doing. I guess back there, and then we'll come up to Edie.
Yeah, John, if I put in a particular name, say I Google a particular name, Leonard Case and so forth, let's say since we're right here at Case Western Reserve, will that search engine put you up the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History?
It does in some instances, and I was talking with Lev Gonik about what we should be doing with the encyclopedia, and Lev's advice was to enhance the searchability of the product. So it's the first time I'm looking at Mr. Nav back there, and yeah, that's possibly where we need to go to do that. Some things we do bounce up right away, but I did a little test. It's interesting you ask this. I Googled John D. Rockefeller, and obviously the first thing was Wiki. And then it was not till I got to the second page that I found Rockefeller. But on other topics that probably get more hits from us, like Tom L. Johnson, we're up there at the top. But we do want to be at the top. And so we need money to re-engineer the structure of the site so that we get those hits. Now, it's something beyond my ken as to how to do that. Yeah. Yes, up front here. No, we'll come back. I'm sorry. Edie. Well, we got one more here. Sorry, Edie. We're doing this in linear order.
You've been referring to the encyclopedia as a product, which puts it in terms of economics and finance and business model. How does that color the way you perceive what might also be termed a service or something else rather than a product?
Well, I would say two things. One, that I have, for many reasons, have living in the sort of the pragmatic world that we are in. You know, people want to get value for something. And I'll tell you a little story off the side. At one point, we were talking about how can we find more money for the online encyclopedia. And this was before the wiki, and that discussion was, well, we can charge people to use it. That would have been the kiss of death had we done that. So it's a scholarly product that's accessible to a broad community. But if somebody wants to look at it as something that's going to benefit them, it is a product that gives them a better visibility. Now, there have been discussions, and I have not, you know, I'm not the sole arbiter here. There have been discussions, well, you could get a sponsor for this. They would have their name on the homepage. You know, hopefully it's not Regency Window Systems. But you know, that's one of the things that you're seeing, and this is a sticky area in the humanities. As to, you know, who is sponsoring what is their axe to grind. History Day and the History Channel are together. And that is grating for some people. You have to be honest about that. So yeah, it is a product, and I hate to say this, but if one is out fundraising for this, there are certain, this community would listen to me, not that I'm asking for money, they will, scholarship is a product of value in and of itself. But there are other buckets of funds out there in which there's some other aspect of interpretation of product. Okay, Edie, you're up, and then Jay is in the back there.
How do you, as the encyclopedia, interact with sites such as Smithsonian, Library of Congress, and are others of you around the country interacting with these major reference sources?
At this point, Edie, we don't. We will look at reference sources that are particularly focused on regional history, even though those would have collections that are pertinent to regional history. And given the staff we have and the time we have, and it takes work to get a URL and to link it and embed it, our preference would be to focus on the local resources. We don't even link to Ohio memory.
Oh, okay.
But we're strictly in northeastern Ohio. I know that's a little parochial, but you know, if the funds are there, I think that's ultimately what will happen in the future.
I guess it would have to come from reverse. They would have to come to all of you, but they do not.
They do not. But this is hilarious. I went on Wiki. Oh God, did I say that? Oh. I went on Wiki and I did a search for Encyclopedia of Cleveland History, and there are nearly 400 and some articles that have citations to the article in the Encyclopedia of Cleveland History. Now, I didn't go to the articles to see how much cut and pasting had been done, but nevertheless, we had made it into that. So. It's a distance factor, either that or I'm...
So you talked about the process by which new material and new entries are added to the encyclopedia. Do you ever purge material from the encyclopedia?
We haven't yet. We haven't dropped anything from the encyclopedia, except egregious errors. And there have been some of those, Jay, but no, we haven't parked anything. Could I correct myself? I'm thinking of the virtual world. We haven't parked anything in the virtual world, but when we did the second edition, when we constructed the second edition, in order to get more information in, even though it was 2 volumes, we truncated almost all the articles that had appeared in the first edition. As Professor Van Tassel would say, we need to squeeze the water out of them, John. And so we did that, and we did drop some at that point to allow for new ones. But again, we're in this world where it's the kid in the candy shop. I hate the bad cliche, but that's it. Al? Oh, my gosh. You want to do one back there, and then we'll come forward?
One quick comment. You had a screen that said why, and I would add an additional bullet on there, and it would be something to the effect of enhanced community self-image and self-worth and self-awareness. And I think this is one heck of a feather in the cap of this community. That's what I'm saying.
Thank you. You know, could I remark on that? When Van Tassel was called in by Homer Wadsworth in 1980, one of the reasons Wadsworth wanted a new history was because Cleveland was finally on the upswing again. And that's, he wanted a chronicle that showed a city that the last full history was William Ganson Rose, completed in the 1940s, city that had gone from the peak to the depths to fall and was beginning to pull itself out. And that was the reason he talked to David. Yeah. Charles, I guess? We're coming forward. I get you.
You talked about Cleveland memory. What does Cleveland memory remember that you don't? And how does history and memory, how do they relate to each other? And what place does oral history have in either of these?
Well, there's several things that happen in Cleveland memory. A lot of Cleveland memory is image, gleaned from the Cleveland Press files, and some marvelous collections that Mr. Barrow has brought into the archives there, including the Newbury and South Shore Railroad. And what it does is it uses those images to spark memory. And where I've been seeing that memory come up, and there's a linearity, so trust me. I see that memory come up. If you read, God help us all, you read the front page of the online plain dealer every day now. Do you remember Mally's chocolates? What happens? You know, people do their memory. And one of the thoughts I've parked in the back of my mind now is that there may be two sides to an encyclopedia product like ours. There's the scholarly narrative, there are the links to the supporting sources, and then there could be a link to memory, how I remember this. Now, the only reason I am hesitant to go forward is one needs to watch every one of those postings. I remember John Grabowski. He was a, you know, you've seen the talk back on but I think that's valid. As a historian, I'm fascinated not so much by what actually occurred, but how people serve to remember that. And forgive me a story here that it's just really intriguing. I frequent a restaurant and bar in Little Italy much too often, and the proprietor there has benefited by my scholarship because he has free copies of the encyclopedia. And he came to me one day and he said, I had a guy in here the other day, John, and he swore the Huff riots were in 1967. And he said, I told him it was 1966. And the guy said, no, you're wrong, you're wrong. So he went back in his office, he pulled the encyclopedia out, and opened it to the Huff riots. The guy took out his pen, scratched out 1966, wrote in 1967. Therein is a humorous tale, but it's one of the issues that we deal with in the scholarly community and interacting with the public. How do you correct unbelief? How do you correct falsehood? How do you not obscure the wealth and richness of memory by criticizing it? You're right, the representation is part of the record. Why did he choose to remember it? That's my question. Why did he choose to remember it as 1967? That's an intriguing thing. Thank you. Go ahead. Okay, we have one there. We're going to be up to you in a second. Ted.
This description that I think you're very effectively made of the vast protean data world in which we live, where it changes universal, it's rapid, it's just, and it's so personal. How do you see the conventional library of the future? Is it going to exist, or is it an anachronism? And what assurance do you have that these data in the electronic media are going to survive?
There's another article by Roy Rosenzweig published 2 years earlier in the American Historical Review. And again, he was chiding his colleagues in the history profession that they needed to begin to be concerned about the preservation of the digital record. Here's a man whose entire career was built on the digital record. I shouldn't say his entire, he gained his greatest fame from that. And so that is a concern. My argument is, until I see otherwise, and I think particularly with original source materials that are not duplicated, that there needs to be a place for the originals to reside. Not only because of potential failure, and I know all my technical friends back there are saying, no, it's not. Potential failure of the storage systems. But also, I'm chary of the manipulability of the digital record. You know, it's not that forgeries haven't gone on forever. You know, ask any royal family or any, you know, but it's so much easier to do that. My usual, when I talk to students, my usual example is, remember Kim Jong-il, who wasn't ill, but he was in front of his troops, been photoshopped in a very famous picture. And even in the days before digitization, Stalin got rid of Trotsky in a picture with a. So there needs to be a secure ground for those things that are the source of secondary literature.
And successive technical obsolescence.
Yeah. Well, it's a successive technical updates. Oh my gosh. Oh, do you want to be an archivist and tear your hair out? Videotape or audio tape, and the question is, you know, drop it to DVD, but you know it's going away. Yeah, digitize it, but and then watch. I'm talking to the man back there. Digitize it, but then change the platforms. We need to change them. I mean, you know, UNIVAC tapes are digital, right? So the issue there's a lot going on. I don't pretend to have full knowledge of it, but I think there is a concern for original material. Okay, I think we. Oh, okay. Now we're gonna have to go back to the room. We should do this. This is non-linear. This is.
Kind of the LeBron example you gave, and also the plain dealer. The plain dealer has a very interesting searchable database. Is there any way, obviously it's very difficult, as you say, to update everything that LeBron left and all the other things that happened, but in terms of the plain dealer as being a daily paper, this is really almost taken care of if it can be linked in with the encyclopedia. Is that anything that's possible?
Yeah, it is. I think there's several things that you're saying. Let me see if I can answer this correctly. One, the plain dealer has linked to the ECH. And unfortunately, it was the Liggett Stash Hour article, the most recent one. They linked to the article in the encyclopedia, so they do use us. And most reporters will say, wonderful thing. But then that opens another issue, and that is information in newspapers as a source for updating articles. When we began this project, we emphasized that if there were archival materials, we would use those to construct the article before we went to a clipping morgue or anything else because of newspaper issues. That was impossible. And we found many times that by taking newspaper data, we were perpetuating errors. That is, somebody made the error in the first article on Joe Fabitz, the next guy pulled it out of the clipping morgue, copied it, so forth. One of the problems with updates is we don't have access to archival material. And I'm looking at my three associate editors here. It's a problem, right? It's a real problem when you're doing a search through LexisNexis or any kind of news agency that is running an article. I tell my students, we still don't know how many people died on the Costa Concordia, do we? They're still sorting that out. I mean, day to day it changes. It's hugely problematic. Okay.
One more question.
Do I look? I'm having fun. You can blip that from the live feed.
I was wondering about this. Since you're now completely digital, you're starting to link to other projects. You're thinking about linking into the memory database. You're thinking about putting more illustrations, more videos, and so on. I mean, is this some sort of form of a new museum, actually some sort of virtual museum of the city of Cleveland that you're creating here?
It could be. I'm sorry to answer it so indefinitely, but it could be because virtual museums are extremely popular right now. And you could create your own virtual museum from information that was there. So if you wanted to do, let's say, a museum on African Americans in Cleveland, and we had enough images up and articles, a student could use, Omeka software, which comes out of George Mason University, to create a virtual museum, a website on that. So yes, we provide the raw materials for that. But But that opens up, one of the things, my enthusiasm is enormous, but we have to approach this logically. And I think the argument right now is what can we do with the existing data that will make it more attractive? And I think it is trying to get more digital, more images, more non-textual material there, because that's so much the learning modality of young people right now. But at the same time, we need to make sure that it's up to date and accurate. So I guess one more? One more.
One of the interesting things is when you pick up, let's say, an old encyclopedia, let's say from 1911, you really get to read it and you get some contemporary versions of what's happening then. And with now a digital encyclopedia, you're constantly updating. So will there ever be a record of how you wrote the topic 20 years ago, especially when you guys get into your 50th year and so forth?
Well, there will be the record of how we wrote it in the 1980s and 1990s in the published volumes, but I look at my colleagues from Kelvin Smith Library, and digital case is not so much a memory site as it is a secure archive for research conducted at Case Western Reserve University. And by its harvesting of each edition on an annual basis, I guarantee you that in 50 years from now, if somebody wants to know what the content of the online encyclopedia was in 2008, they'll be able to do that. So, and that's remarkable about digital case. And I think that's one of the treasures of this university that we often don't see as much as we should. It's an incredible archive of research, ideas, thoughts, products that come out of the faculty of this incredible institution. Thank you, John. You're welcome. Thank you.